We are on the second leg of the webinar series, spread over 14 days in 3 weeks. This brilliantly bright and warm morning here at Kunnapalli, Melur, on the serene banks of the famed Chalakudi River, Wednesday, the 30th of June, 2021. Well, we can feel a gentle caressing wind blowing across the waters of the Chalakudi River. It's an ideal setting for an enlightening session like this, isn't it? On this day, the 9th day of this second edition of our annual webinar series codenamed Emerge 2021, we are witnessing the start of the 15th continuous session of this series here at Nirmala College of Arts and Science, Melur, Chalakudi. Well, friends, we have been enjoying a rich banquet of academic delicacies for the last 9 days. The 2021 edition of Emerge is more enriched, more colorful, and more enlightening than the previous Emerge 2020. It's a unique academic fiesta spread over 14 working days, 24 colorful sessions, and 24 experts from various fields. Oh, it's a very, very exciting academic exercise. Friends, this is the Nirmala way of dealing with the serial killer COVID-19 pandemic. Well, friends, let me now formally welcome the guest of this session, Dr. Ajay S. Sekhar, a senior faculty member, a research supervisor and coordinator of the Center for Buddhist Studies at Sri Sankara University of Sanskrit, Kalady. Dr. Sekhar, who has a large number of publications to his credit, is also a widely known teacher, researcher, writer, painter, and photographer. He has been delivering lectures on literary and cultural studies at various universities and colleges in India and especially across Kerala. His critical essays and articles have been published in various international leading journals. Among his other interests are travel and music. Dr. Sekhar is also a very strong presence and very popular with a strong follower base on the social media for his research-based documentaries on a variety of topics, especially related to Kerala Renaissance. For example, Navothanate Marigadana Jadi Vivechanam, Mahabaliyo, Vamanano, Aratuvula, Velaita Panikirum, Kerala Navothanam, Dalavakulam Kutakula has more than 81,000 followers. His most recent Iti Achudan Vaidirim Hortus Malabarigum, just launched 3 days ago, has more than 2,000 followers. Well, friends, we are indeed very, very fortunate to have got such a distinguished figure to interact with us today. Sir, with a lot of love and affection, I welcome you to this session of the webinar series. Now, friends, let me formally welcome you all to this august occasion. First, the chairman of the Nirmala Group of Institutions, Mr. Sajeev Atoli, and the executive director, Ms. Dalit Literature, who is also presiding over this function. The great duo sitting at the helm of Nirmala. With lots of love and warmth, I welcome them both to this great event. I also extend a very warm and cordial welcome to our vice principal, the heads of departments, and all members of our teaching fraternity and the non-teaching staff, and I welcome them all. Finally, my dear students, the hundreds of registered participants watching the proceedings on their mobile phones and the comfort of their homes, with a lot of love and affection, I extend a very, very warm welcome to them all. Once again, I welcome you all with the best wishes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. I also welcome you, sir, to this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to review a few technical details Please feel free to submit your questions through chat box. Please fill up the feedback forms which we provide to get the participation certificate. Thank you. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a very prominent speaker who has enlightened the students with his wisdom and knowledge. We are very fortunate that he has consented to be with us today. I consider it to be a privilege to give you more details about Dr. Ajay S. Sekhar, Assistant Professor and Research Supervisor, Department of English, Sri Sankara University of Sanskrit, Kalady, Kerala, member of Board of Studies in English in SSUS and in MA College, Kodamangala, published numerous critical essays, reviews, and translations in journals like EPW, Intel Literature, Litcrit, MLS, MRJ, and so on. Edited an issue of Malayalam Research Journal on literary cultural theories. He was honored with 3 awards: Adya Deepam Award in 2014, Sahodran Sahitya Puraskaram in 2015, and Lord Buddha Universal Award in 2017. He also has several publications, and his translations of renowned writers were included in the Oxford Anthology of Modern Malayalam Literature and the Oxford Anthology of Malayalam Dalit Writing. Now, with much ado, let me invite Dr. Ajay S. Sekhar to take over the session. We eagerly look forward to listen to your views and expertise on the topic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and good morning. And I'm really honored and pleased to be part of this great international webinar series conducted by Nirmala College, Chalakudi. I salute you all. Once again, my greetings and good morning to each one of you. I'm especially thankful to Professor Murugan Babu and the college, the department, the chairman and the executive board, and all the students who are participating here, the researchers who have joined us, registering online. So this is, I must appreciate the great efforts of the principal and the college in initiating such timely intellectual debates and academic conferences. Previous year also, I was honored with the kind of invitation and I participated in your program, Emerge 2020. This year also, it's a great opportunity. This is how we are culturally and intellectually, in an academic engaged way, we are trying to defeat the pandemic, and we are overcoming the pandemic, fortunately. So here today, our topic of discussion this bright morning, as Professor Babu has expressed on this bright sunny morning, we are talking about pedagogy and education at large. So the topic is democratizing the pedagogy and democratizing the canon in pedagogy. So there are certain technical words related to education and ELT in particular, which we need to look into details or understand before, because students and interested people from various disciplines are here. Therefore, I would like to begin with a discussion or explanation or definition of the key terms or the keywords included in the discussion. So the topic is democratizing the canon, representation and inclusion in pedagogy. That's the complete title. So it focuses on key concepts like the canon and also pedagogy. So canon, as we know today, is nothing but the battery of texts. The battery of texts that are included in the syllabi or included in the curriculum, and those that are taught to students or those that are there in their individual course syllabus. That's what the canon is all about. So canon is nothing but a battery of texts. It is an accepted body of literature or writing. That is what canon generally is, or it is understood in the general sense of a list of books. In simple terms, it is nothing but a list of books or a series of cultural artifacts. It may include paintings or music or films and other theatrical productions and other forms of intellectual production as well. So basically, in contemporary academics, we are talking about a series of books or a list of books that are acknowledged and established as the fundamental pivotal works of significance that the students are supposed to study, or the general readers are supposed to read if they want to be part of the tradition or that discipline. They must they must read it, or they are expected to read and study the canon. So canon simply means a rule or law or a list or a rod or a measuring rod. In earlier usages in the 18th century and on, it was used to refer to the measuring rod, the yardstick. So it is also having, from the ancient times onwards, it is also having a religious kind of affiliation, because in religion, the established figures and the established scripture, the scripture of the religion is called the canon. That's also called the canon, C-A-N-O-N. There are two words with the same pronunciation. C-A-N-O-N, canon, which means the law, the rule, the religious principle, the scripture. And also C-A-N-N-O-N, cannon. That means a big gun, which is part of the artillery, the cannon of Tipu Sultan, you could say. That is also there, but it is having a slightly different spelling. Double N is there, but both words, C-A-N-O-N, canon, as a battery of texts, and C-A-N-N-O-N, canon, as an artillery weapon or instrument, or a huge gun or a pipe, kind of huge gun. It's also called the canon. So anyway, we are talking about the first canon, C-A-N-O-N, canon, as a principle or law or fundamental rule in literature. In the institution of literature, the canon means, in ELT, in English language teaching, in pedagogy or education in general, the canon means nothing but a list of books, a list of accepted, acknowledged, established body of literature or writing. That is what the canon is all about. But of course, it has its religious origin. You talk about the Christian canon, the Judeo-Christian canon, the canon of the Catholic Church in particular. The Catholic canon means, of course, the scripture is part of it, and also a lot of canonized figures, a lot of beatified or canonized priests and nuns would be, some saints would be part of it. So you cannot question it. That is the religious dimension of the word canon. You also have the Buddhist canon, the Pali Tipitaka. It's called the canon. So canon means the rule, the principle, the law, the foundational measure or measuring yard or yardstick or standard in general. And here we are talking about the literary canon or canon in literature. For example, you have Harold Bloom himself in the late 1990s, towards the end of the last century. Harold Bloom, a renowned critic in English language, he has written something called the Western Canon. He published a book called The Western Canon. It's about the various books and the various schools of English writing or English literature. So the canon is something that is written about. The canon is something that is codified. The canon is something that is constructed. It is literally constructed or manufactured by human subjects, human individuals, critics and writers and historiographers, literary historiographers, commentators, they create the canon in and through their writing or their larger representations. It may be termed as critical discourses. So the canon is a product of critical discourse. Discourse as a way of saying, a way of communicating, a way of seeing and saying and representing things. Language, especially language and other forms of communication, when it is used in certain concrete socio-political contexts, or language as it is used in praxis is called discourse. So canon is often a product of literary and critical discourses. It's an outcome of intellectual labor and writing and speaking and conferences and seminars and webinars like this. This is what is creating the canon. The canon is often constructed. It is not something given or natural or normal. It is not existing out there as it is, but it evolves, it changes, it is constructed and reconstructed, it is deconstructed, and it is being renewed and refashioned every time according to the time and the place and the changing sensibility, the philosophical affiliations and the socio-political conditions and contexts are going to determine the canon. That's the first thing that we need to understand and define in relation with literary canon formation or the construction of the canon, is that it is a construct. It is a construct of the existing socio-cultural and political discourses and intellectual debates in particular, philosophical and intellectual traditions and religious and other socio-cultural elements, even micro-political elements like not just religion, but region, language, gender, sexuality, caste, race, class. All these things are operating in the formation of a canon. So the canon is something intersectional in the sense that it is created and recreated on various denominations based on various yardsticks and parameters and changing kind of variables. These are some of them: caste, class, gender, sexuality, language, religion, region. So many aspects of cultural identity and socio-political existence, ground realities, material realities, socio-historical realities, cultural and historical and political realities are going to determine the canon. So canon is not a naive or a neutral kind of creation, but it is a human construct, or it's part of the human discourses and endeavors. It is discursive. It is discursive means it's related to the discursive context. The contexts are going to determine the praxis and the discourse. And therefore, the canon is contextual. The canon is constructed. The canon is political and ideological because it is determined by the politics and ideology, the set of ideas and beliefs and value systems are going to determine it. That's what you call ideology. Louis Althusser has that term. Michel Foucault has developed the notion of the discourse. So it is discursive, it's ideological and political to the core. So canon is not something innocent and naive, but it's a very complex socio-political, ideological, discursive kind of construct. This is another important aspect of the canon, the literary canon in particular. What are the books that are taught in education, in pedagogy? What are the books that are included in the syllabus? What are the books that are excluded from it? What are the books that we often evade? What are the discourses that we often sideline or silence or we elude? These are the questions concerning the canon. This is called the politics of the canon. So the canon is not something standard, not something everlasting, not something eternal or universal, but it is specifically related to the socio-political conjunctures. And of course, it is to be changed also. There should be a change in the canon. If we need a change in the discourse, if we need a change in the intellectual atmosphere and the general mentality of the society, in the philosophical and political kind of discourses of society, we need to change the canon periodically also. We also need to include certain things. We have to get things out of it, those things that are outdated or obsolete or that are against the modern democratic values of our society. So canon is subject to change. That's another. Canon is a construct. Canon is ideological or political. Canon is discursive. And canon is subject to change. Canon itself is change in a certain way. Because if you change the canon, Matuvin Chattangalai, that's the great poet laureate of Kerala speaking. If you don't change your canon, the canon itself will change you. That's the warning, the early warning that he gave us and to the world in early 20th century as part of the Renaissance cultural struggles of Kerala. So changing the canon is often changing the society, changing the politics, and change in politics will in turn reflect in the canon formation as well. So canon is nothing fixed and universal and everlasting, nothing eternal about it. The canon is subject to change. Everything is subject to change. Nothing is unchangeable as change itself. The great words of the Buddha, the philosophy, the core philosophy of the Buddha is that change is the only permanent thing, or nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent, the theory of impermanence. That's what the Buddha also taught us some 2,600 years ago. Again, Ashan himself wrote, he was inspired by Edwin Arnold, the British poet and scholar. And The Light of Asia of Edwin Arnold was translated in a free manner rendered into Malayalam by Ashan himself, which he published in early 1910s. In the form of Buddha Charitam, and he equaled the glorious, the golden-tongued Ashwaghosha himself, who wrote about the enlightened one. So even today, Ashan is compared to Ashwaghosha on account of this particular verse translation. So canon will change. Till then, Sankara Smriti, Keralolpatti, Kerala Mahatmyam, all these things were part of the canon. From the 16th century onwards, Keralolpatti and Kerala Mahatmyam and Sankara Smriti and Parashurama Smriti were part of the canon. Like Manusmriti was the canon here in India. For at least from the beginning of the Common Era in North India, at least from the fall of the great Mauryan Empire, Ashoka and Chandragupta, beginning with grandfather of Ashoka, Chandragupta Maurya, who was a Jain, and Ashoka, who converted to Buddhism, and his followers who were Buddhism till Brihadrata in BC 1st century. In the last century of BC, Brihadrata Maurya was assassinated through cheat by his own militiaman, his own military captain, called Pushyamitra Sunga. That's the rise of the Brahmanical usurpation to power in North India. Because Mauryan Empire, which was the largest, one of the largest empires of the whole world, it was having from Kandahar from Gandhara to the Southeast Asia, it was prevalent. Ashokan rule was the missionary work. The ethical empire of Ashoka expanded even to the far corners of the world. His own daughter and his own son, Mahinda and Sanghamitra, they went to various parts of South India and South Asia and Ceylon. And even he sent monks to Italy and the far west kind of Mediterranean countries, to West Asia and Mediterranean countries. So that kind of a huge empire collapsed because of the rise of the Sunga dynasty under Pushyamitra Shunga, who betrayed his emperor and assassinated him. So anyway, these kind of changes are happening. So with the changes of the political world, with the changes of the socio-political world, the canon will also change. So the canon is subject to change. That's what we need to understand. So it must be changed towards the better, not towards totalitarianism or not towards this kind of Sunga cheat and betrayal, but towards a more egalitarian, more democratic, more ethical kind of formations. The canon must be changed. That's the necessity in a contemporary, modern, democratic world. The canon should be democratized. That's the fundamental objective of the canon, and education in particular. Creating critical and ethical consciousness in the new individuals, in the developing citizens of the future. They need to be inculcated with these great liberal human values and ethical values for posterity, for the future, for the sustenance of this world and this society. And that's the primary aim of education. Pedagogy, that's another key word which we need to discuss. Pedagogy is nothing but the philosophy and practice of education. The theory and art of teaching, that's what pedagogy is all about. It's all from goji, Greek kind of pedo means the child, and goji means a kind of leading or teaching, the act of teaching. So pedagogy, of course, it's the art and science of teaching. It's otherwise called education, educational philosophy, and educational theory and practice. Methodology is also included. The practice and methodology is very much part of education. So pedagogy, the next key word. We have discussed about canon as an established battery of texts that are included or established in the institution of literature, and that are included in the syllabus of various students in higher education in particular. And now let us come to the next key word, that is pedagogy. Pedagogy here means, as I told you, is nothing but education. In simple terms, it is education. It is teaching. It is the art of teaching. It is the science and methodology of teaching. It's both the philosophy and practice of teaching. It's all included here as pedagogy. In the ancient world, as we have seen, it was there in the intellectual traditions of India. In Buddha, we have his Sangha, which is nothing but a greater educational kind of establishment. A Sangha is an egalitarian democratic setup of education, educating the monks and nuns first, and then they will go to the people and they will educate. For a bhiksha or a one-time bread, they are allowed to take bhiksha only once in a day, in a solar day. They can eat only for one time. They can have a one-time meal per day. That too, they have to take it from the people, the common people. They have to go to the people, and whatever is left there, the leftover of the working people, the people, the toiling masses, that is to be accepted as a bhiksha for one time. And that meal, that is called a bhiksha. So they have to accept that bhiksha. They have to eat it, and then they have to deliver a kind of ethical discourse, a discourse of education. They have to enter into a debate with the people. And this is also in religious terms, it's called a sermon, the Theravada in the tradition. The sermon, in Mahayana, you can have more food and more delicacies and all those things. But in the ancient first Buddhism, which is called the Theravada, the elder cart, the elder Buddhist idealism, which was promoted by Ashoka in particular. Till Ashokan times, it was Theravada, and only in the 2nd, 3rd century, Mahayana developed after Nagarjuna, the great scholar who came from Brahmanism itself, and who unfortunately paved the foundation for the liberalization and the fragmentation of Buddhism also through the creation of Mahayana, which mystified the teachings, the Anityavada, the theory of impermanence, or the theory of dependent origination. It's called the Paditya Samutpada, or the Anitya, or Anich. In Pali, it is called Anich. Anich, Anath, and Dukh. These are the foundational principles. Impermanence. Then if everything is changing, there is no fixed eternity. There is no fixed God, or there is no fixed soul, or the spiritual world. And then what is there in the world, it is the problems and miseries of the people. So you have to find the answers to the miseries and the problems of the people, like death, like disease, like various forms of hardships and sufferings. There is a great amount of suffering. I do not know about the mysteries of God and goddesses, but I am concerned about the problems and the suffering of the people in this world, in this life. That was Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan Sukhaya. I don't know about the Atma or Paramatma, but I am concerned about the people, at the greater common good and the welfare of the people. Bahujana Sukh, the good, and also the intended good, that is the hit of the people, the welfare, the larger welfare, the egalitarian, equanimous kind of equity and justice. There should be equity and justice, samta, and not a mechanical kind of rationalism. It was a rationalism because it is anitya, paditya samutpada, or dependent origination, but it was a compassionate kind of rationalism. That's the peculiarity of the Buddha. So this tradition of dialogue and debate or teaching, it was there. I was just mentioning about the ancient times, the time of the Buddha, BC 6th century, when he lived. Ashoka lived 200 years after the Buddha. BC 3rd century he lived. And then, of course, the Sunga reign was here from early Common Era, at least from the last century of BC. The Sungas came here, and then Manusmriti became the canon. Manusmriti was canonized. Manusmriti became the law, the book of law. Like our canon is our constitution. In modern contemporary India, the canon of the people is nothing but the constitution of India, which is the book of law, which is the rule, which is the principle, which is the what you call the ethical contract between the nation state and the people. So it was not like this till 1950s. 1950 is the coming of age, or the constitution came to power. The constitution was accepted by the parliament and the people of India only in 1950, January 26. That's the Republic Day. India became a modern democratic republic through that constitution. So that is our canon now, but it was not the canon till the 1950s. Even after 1950s, it continued. Even when the constitution was in effect, was accepted as the rule of India. The architect of the constitution, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, he was denied access to a public worshipping place. He was treated as an untouchable, even after the constitution came to power. That's the tragedy of it. Ambedkar himself has warned about that kind of a tragedy because the ethics and morality of the people who are the custodians of the constitution, or the people who are explaining and interpreting the constitution, their ethics and morality are fundamental. He warned us. And also he warned us, without social equality, political equality is a mockery. It's going to be wasted, because without a respect for humanity and equality, without an egalitarian kind of culture and society in the making, how can you impose it from the top? It cannot be imposed through the constitution to a greater extent, but still, especially when the constitution is in peril, in continuous kind of suspension and abrogation and constant amendment now, and it is taken to an extreme extent where it is used against itself. That kind of a condition is prevalent in the country today because of the growing intolerance and the kind of fanatic forms of jingoism that is growing in the country. The cultural nationalism and narrow nationalism has taken over, and it has captivated a lot of people, especially from the North Indian belt. Fortunately, because of our enlightened legacy, the great Changam tradition and the Sangham literary tradition, South India, especially Kerala and Tamil Nadu, we are resisting. But even Karnataka, our close neighbors and cousins, they lost the battle and they are now in deep peril. What happened in Gujarat or what is happening in UP, it can come to us also at any moment. So therefore, we need to be extremely watchful and vigilant against this changing canon. So canon, of course, we will digress when we talk about politics and society, because it is such a pertinent and imminent issue in the present. So we are likely to digress. So let us come back to literature and critical theory, literary critical theory, where you talk about the canon as an established battery of texts which are used in education in particular. In the higher academia, it is used. So it is a political construct we have seen. So in the days of colonialism, we are all beneficiaries of colonialism in a sense, but also we need to be critical about the human rights violations and the kind of inequality that was there in colonialism. So we need to be critical about the colonial aspects of English, but we need to embrace the modernity aspect, the liberative aspects of English. Even fashionable high theorists like Gayatri Spivak, the leading post-colonial critics of the world, professor at Columbia and all, even she accepts colonialism as an enabling wound. It's a wound, of course. It's a trauma. It's a disaster. It's a bleeding wound, but still it's an enabling wound. It has enabled the people at large. So it's both a poison and a potion at the same time. It's both a toxic thing as well as it is a medicinal thing at the same time. So we have to reject the toxic element of English and colonialism, or the colonial aspect of English, which is of course nothing but the colonial canon, because English was introduced in the third world, in the colonies by Britain in 18th century as part of a larger imperial kind of project. It was partisan with British imperialism. So therefore, English is having many dangers of the colonial high culture, or the colonial superior culture, or the imperial culture is pertinent. It is part and parcel of the discipline of English. We need to reject it all, because we are conversing in English language. We can converse to the whole nation or the whole world through English language. It is having that kind of an international, of course, through the history of colonialism, it has provided this international break for English. And through colonialism, they have imbibed from various parts of the world also. Their vocabulary, the OED, is growing every day or every week or every year, because it is imbibing many words and usages from various regional languages in the whole world. So though they have conquered and they have exploited the world, they have also imparted certain things. Their Enlightenment tradition of Europe, for example, modernity of Europe, which was saluted by all the critical thinkers and philosophers who provided the break here at the wake of modernity. Narayana Guru in 1914, he said, it is the British who are our gurus. നമുക്ക് സന്യാസം തന്ന നമ്മുടെ ഗുരുക്കന്മാരാണ് അവർ എന്നാണ് ഗുരു തൻ്റെ ഗുരുക്കന്മാരായ ബ്രിട്ടീഷുകാരെ കുറിച്ച്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പാശ്ചാത്യ ആധുനികത. He was talking about, sorry to go into Malayalam, because to quote the words of the great Guru, we need to go to the first language. So anyway, it is Narayana Guru who made this historic statement in early 20th century. In 1914, he made the statement that the British, or the Western modernity at large, or the Enlightenment tradition of Western metaphysics, that is my Guru, or they are our gurus, because they have given us the freedom for education, even for English education, and also even to study the native tongue and Sanskrit and Tamil and everything, because the Manusmriti was the canon. I told you it prohibited the learning of letters. The letters of the alphabets were prohibited to the Shudra and women of all Varna and Avarnas and the Mlechas. The Mlechas means the minorities in Brahminical term. Avarna or Chandal means the untouchables, the Avarna sections, those who are outside the Chaturvarnya Varnashrama Dharma project, the Savarna system, they are called the Avarnas. And the Shudras, those who are within the Chaturvarnya system as the last and fourth Varna. And women of all Varnas and castes, they were also denied education. Shudra Akshara Samyuktam Dure Parivarjyati. The Shudra who learns letters must be chased away as a rabid dog, as a mad dog. He must be chased away or killed at the instant. That's what Shambhuga experienced. That's why the Guru said, if it was in the time of Rama, I would have met with the fate of Shambhuga, because the Shudradis were not allowed for education and sagehood during the Ram Raj, during the time of Ram. Even Ram, who is proclaimed as a Maryada Purushottam, he went and chased and brutally beheaded that sage Shambhuga by saying that he is a Shudra. Just on his caste and his Varna, he was killed. He didn't do anything against any ethical or moral principles of the world. He was simply becoming a sage. He was educating himself and educating others, and he was meditating to become a sage, which was prohibited in according to the Brahminical religious terms in India, as per the Vedic Sanatana Varnashrama Dharma system, or the Chaturvarnya system, or the Varna caste system in briefs. So he violated the Varna and caste rules, and therefore the protector of Varnashrama Dharma, Lord Ram, beheaded him. So this is what happened. That's why the Guru said, it's the British who gave us sannyas. And he also sent all his disciples. He couldn't learn English language, but he was very receptive. He was listening. The primary skill in any language, in education, in ELT, we talk about the LSRW, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. These are the fundamental skills that we need to exercise, and he listened a lot. He learned Tamil simply through reading. He was not formally initiated into Tamil, but he went to, in Peta, I think there was a book, old bookshop, and whenever he used to pass, he used to sit in and assist the merchant, the bookshop manager. And by that time, when he returns after a meal or going somewhere, he used to read all those things. That's how he became a master of Changam poetry and those Siddha verses and all those Tamil works. He read all the Pancha Mahakavyas, the Aimperunkapiyam, Silappadigaram, Manimekhali, Valayapatti, Jivagajindamani, Kundalagesi, and also Tiruvalluvar, the great sage of South India, who wrote the Bible of South India, which is called the Tirukural. After the Tipitaka, it is called Tirikural also, because it is also having those three great volumes or books, Arul Mudal, Aram and all, Purul, Aram, Mudal and all. It lacks the, what you call the moksha concept of Brahminical, what you call these Purusharthas. So it is having a different ethics. It's having a different epistemology as such. It's having a Shramana or Buddhist and Jain kind of epistemological tradition on which the Tirukural is based and on which all the fivefold great epics of Tamils are based. But nobody, unfortunately, in Kerala, we are not concerned about our South Indian great Tamil epics, but we are concerned about the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Which the Guru himself has dismissed as this is something, if it was in the time of Ram, I would have met with the fate of Shambhuga, because Shambhuga as a Shudra, he was killed by Ram himself, the so-called Kshatriya, to save the Varnashrama Dharma or the caste system. And his own disciples, like Sodharan, for example, when Gandhiji came, he was a great devotee of Lord Ram and Vishnu himself. He took it all from the Vaishnavism, Gujarati Vaishnavism, the term Harijan and all. When he came to meet the Guru himself, he taught him, showing that mango tree before his ashram on that Wakala hillock. He said, look at Gandhiji, you see all those things are different. The leaves are different on this mango tree. But if you take the leaves, look at the color and look at the essence. If you taste the essence of it, and if you analyze the study the color of it and the texture and the general form, it's the same. So there is no justification, even in nature, even in natural law, even in nature, you cannot have a justification for the Varnashrama Dharma. But Gandhiji was not that much convinced. Even after meeting the Guru passed away in 1928. Even after that, in the 1930s, he went for that, what you call the Pune Pact. And also he wrote something called the Varnashrama Dharma. Based on the Manusmriti, he wrote Varnashrama Dharma, idealizing the theory of the caste system, which is the Varnashrama Dharma. And it is something that is a praiseworthy kind of principle, social engineering, according to Gandhiji. He idealized it as Swadharma. And he was also, we know about all those things. I don't want to enter into those debates of scavenging and manual scavenging and all those things and forcing others to do this. So anyway, this is the problem with the canon formation. The canon is often the product of power. The canon is often the product of elitism. The canon is often the product of the ruling culture or the hegemonic classes, the dominant and the ruling elite. They are called the hegemonic aspect of society, the hegemonic culture. That is a concept from Antonio Gramsci. It is not just Ambedkar who has written about it all, who criticized these kind of elitist formations, but it is the neo-left thinker, the neo-Marxist thinker, Antonio Gramsci. We talked about Althusser and Foucault, and also it is Antonio Gramsci who coined the term hegemony to refer to social and cultural forms of subordination, a kind of indirect rule, a rule by consent. That is what hegemony is all about. A consensual rule where even the victims are complicit in it because everything normalized and regularized in the form of religion or so-called culture, and you cannot question it. You accept it as a dogma. You accept it as a canon, and you won't question it. So the canon is often a product of power and repression and hegemony. The canon is often hegemonic, and it excludes many things. That's why in the canon you won't find many women. You won't find even in the Western canon, even in the Harold Bloom's canon, as another scholar has enlightened us, John Guillory. John Guillory, he has written about the cultural capital after that great French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, the French post-structural sociologist. Pierre Bourdieu has enlightened about the cultural forms of capital, various forms of capital. Capital is not just economic, as the classical Marxists are saying. Capital is not just based on your economic position, but socio-cultural and political aspects of life are also important. Those are very important aspects of identity. It is not just the class position that determines your identity, but there are different forms of capital, says argued Pierre Bourdieu. So after Bourdieu, it is John Guillory, G-U-I-L-L-O-R-Y, Guillory, who has written about it, the cultural capital, the problem of the canon formation. So he has enlightened us about the importance of exclusion and inclusion in the canon. So canon often excludes non-privileged people. Canon is a product of power and patriarchy and white supremacist discourse in the West. What is called a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. People like bell hooks, black women critics like bell hooks, they talk about the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy of America and the West in general. So likewise, John Guillory has enlightened us, basing his work on Pierre Bourdieu himself, who himself he is having a kind of egalitarian and a humanistic kind of approach in sociology, that the canon is a product of patriarchy. The canon is a product of white supremacism. The canon is often a product of various forms of hierarchies and exclusions. Multiple marginalities and intersections are there in the formation of the canon. So therefore, we need to revise it. We need to verify it. We need to have a kind of social evaluation, critical, ethical evaluation, reevaluation of the canon, and it is to be democratized. It is to be democratized in the sense that democracy is nothing but the rule of the people by themselves. That's what democracy in simple terms. But in more politically aware terms, it is the rule through representation, a rule through proxy. We cannot rule directly, but we are sending our representatives, we are electing our representatives, especially in the parliamentary system of democracy. In social democracy, we are electing our representatives and sending them to the legislative assembly or the parliament, and they are making the laws for us on behalf of the people. So the agency is with the people. So their voices are to be represented in a true democracy. So democracy is nothing about meritocracy or talent or merit or any forms of capital. It's not according to your economic capital or your cultural capital or socio-cultural privileges, but every human individual is having the same share and the same right. So that's the importance of representation of the real majority of the people. True representation is the soul and spirit and the foundation, material foundation of any form of democracy. Ours is that, a social democracy that was imagined by our founding fathers, especially the chief architect of our constitution, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar himself. So democracy is the rule of the people. Democracy is the rule representative form of government through the real representation of the people. There is no democracy without representation. That's the primary literacy, the primary democratic socio-political literacy that our students are to develop. So we need to have true democracy. And if we need to make the canon truly democratic, we need to ensure that there is adequate representation of the real majority of the people, especially the excluded people, the historically wronged people, the historically excluded and marginalized people. Their voices must be rehabilitated in the canon. This is nothing charity or generosity of the ruling elite, but this is a primary process, a primary ethical vantage and foundation for establishing a democracy. Therefore, these voices of the people must be included into the canon. Only when those erased voices, those silenced voices, those voices hitherto unknown and obliterated or obscured voices and writings, when you include it into the canon, your canon can be justified. Only when the real majority of people are represented, the canon or the parliament or the legislative assembly or the panchayat or even any education institution or any public sector service office or organization can be justified. Only when the people are represented in it. Only when various sections, social sections who are denied justice in particular, who are given access into it or who are adequately represented into it, it becomes democratic. So we are a democracy. We are for representation. We are not a meritocracy. Merit is having many underpinnings and foundations. It is not a product of mere quality or mere what you call intellectual kind of rigor, but it is a socio-cultural and political product. What kind of education you had, what kind of upbringing you had, what kind of social family, community background you had, that is going to determine your merit. So merit is often a product of power, like the canon. So therefore, we are not a meritocracy. We are not going by the merit, but we are going for the true representation of various social sections, and we are going for a social democratic paradigm, a democratic paradigm which is based on representation. So that is how we are arguing for the democratization of the canon. That means hitherto unknown voices, excluded voices, marginalized subjectivities, and their writing and their cultural kind of articulations in politics must be reflected in the syllabus, in the university curriculum, in the educational field, in pedagogy, in education as a whole. This changed, renewed kind of pedagogy or renewed kind of canon must be included in the curriculum. So this is what we are supposed to do in a pedagogy for a democratic world, for an education for the present and the future. We need to be inclusive, we need to be representative, we need to be egalitarian, and we need to ethically acknowledge the other and give voice to the other, to listen to the other, and to make the other listen to you as well. That's what Narayana Guru also taught us, especially in his the first religious parliament that he has conducted in Kerala and in the whole of Asia in 1921. After 1921, he conducted that, he convened that meeting of the Parliament of World Religions with the support from Sahodaran and other disciples. So there he wrote and published that document there as a key message. He was saying that this is not to argue and defeat, because that has been the dominant hegemonic tradition in India, arguing and defeating and even deporting or killing your intellectual or religious opponent. That was the tradition here, because the Chaturvarnya project got established through that kind of violence and cheat and hegemonic kind of invasions, the internal imperialism. Guru's own disciple, Swami John Dharmatirtha, he has written that book called The History and the Menace of Hindu Imperialism, about the Hindu colonialism or the internal imperialism. So it is that critical legacy of the Guru that Dharmatirtha has developed into it. Even today, scholars like J. Raghu and others, they are continuing with that critical kind of analysis of this caste system and the hegemonic Varnashrama Dharma, Sanatana Dharma project of India. So he made it a key message that it is not to argue and defeat, but it is to know the other and let the other know your own perspective. So that kind of intersubjective ethics was established in Kerala in early 20th century itself by the Guru. So we have that long legacy, at least 100 years of democratic tradition in Kerala. And we have the great example from Mahatma Phule and Mrs. Phule and Mr. and Mrs. Sheikh, who supported Phule's. And later in the Ambedkar-led democratic revolution of the Dalit peoples of India, the Dalit democratic revolution, as pointed out by Gail Omweth and many other scholars, Eleanor Zelliot, Gail Omweth, and many others, as Sharmila Rage herself has written about it, against the madness of the Manu, against the Brahminical canon and the book of law, the caste book of law, the casteist double speak of Manusmriti. We had devised a new democratic constitution, but unfortunately that constitution is in peril today because it is being abrogated and amended on a day-to-day basis. And its ethical core is the social justice core of the Indian constitution is dismantled today. So we need to stand with justice and ethics, with the social justice paradigm of our constitution. Our canon is to be brought back into its spirit of justice and egalitarianism. And we need to ensure inclusion in every walk of life, especially in education, especially in the syllabus. We need to include the erased and silent voices. That's the significance of new literatures. That's why we have more women writers, even in the Western canon. Even in Harold Bloom's work, you find many women brought back into currency. In the colonial canon, as Terry Eagleton and Edward Said and others have pointed out, post-colonial critics and British Marxist critics, Catholic Marxists like Eagleton himself, in the Introduction to Literary Theory, he claimed, he wrote it, that the British introduced the English canon in 19th century in Indian universities, especially in Calcutta University and all, as a mode of establishing their cultural supremacism. They were teaching Greek and Latin till 1921, till the Newbolt report of 1921 or 24. The British people, they were teaching Greek and Latin in their Oxbridge tradition, in Oxford and Cambridge. But in 19th century, almost a century before, they introduced their English curriculum, English pedagogy, English canon in Indian universities in order to establish their imperial power, in order to create English as an imperial pedagogy kind of practice through which they can tame the natives. They can create, according to Lord Babington Macaulay, the 1835 minutes and all. Their intention was to create some lower class, but unfortunately, it benefited the people. That's why I said in the beginning, invoking Spivak, that it's both a medicine and a poison. We need to revise it. We need to democratize it. Even the Western canon is under refashioning. They have revised it. They have included the people of color. They have included women. They have included minorities, even not just the religious minorities, even in linguistic and sexual minorities are now being, LGBTQ people and writers are now being included in the canon, because their sensibility matters. They are an excluded lot. They are a victimized lot. They were not given adequate representation and visibility in the public sphere and in the arena of education. That's why homophobia was booming in various parts of the world. So every minority, every religious sect, every social groups, especially those who are denied justice and equal shares in history, those who are suppressed and sidelined and silenced for centuries, they must be given their rightful shares in the parliament and also in the textbook, in the pedagogy, in education. They must be revived. So that's why we have African Americans coming into picture. We have African literatures in the English syllabi. We have the Australian slang and the New Zealand Maori tribal First Nations speaking. The ancient Canadians and the First Nations of Canada are now included in the syllabus. We are teaching it to, from the BA classes to the PhD coursework and MPhil students, we are teaching African American texts or Australian Aboriginal texts or Maori ancient nation texts or Canadian First Nation or Amerindian texts, Leslie Marmon Silko, or other ancient people from the ancient First Nations are there in the syllabus today. So in India also, these kind of changes are happening in education. In our field earlier, Indian was something taught as Hindu. Indian was equal to Sanskritic and the Hindu hegemonic system. But now Indian is being under reconstruction, or what is India is being deconstructed, and it is made more inclusive and representative. So now we have sections on Dalit literature. In Indian literature itself, we talk about Dalit literature, not about the Sanadana Smriti Shruti and the Rasadhwani Siddhantas, but about not just about Manusmriti and the Rasadhwani and the Kalidasa or Bhasa and all those Paradamini and all. Not just about Natya Shastra, but we are also talking about the tribal writings, the ancient tribal legacies of India. So the tribal or Adivasi writing, the Dalit writing, the minority writing, the writing from South India, the South Indian epics that were hitherto unknown and erased, the Panchamahakavyas and all, the Tirukural and all, the Buddhist epics like Manimekalai, written by Chatanar, Madhavi and Manimekalai and all those who are coming to Vanchi in our Kodingalur and going across the Western Ghats to other parts, to Pumbuhar or to Kanchi. And those South Indian journeys are now being acknowledged widely. So we have to include more from South India, more from the Dravidian land, more from Tamil, more from the ancient Dalit and tribal or Adivasi writing of India, more from the Northeast, more from Kashmir, more from other parts of India. And now Indian literature itself is a decentered kind of a canon. The canon is being decentered. The canon is being deconstructed. And the canon is being refashioned or rethought, reimagined, or changed altogether to include the excluded voices, to give voices to the silenced. We are changing the canon. So that kind of formation, that kind of a reformation and renewal and deconstruction is happening in Indian literature or Indian literatures also. Now, that's why we are now talking about it in plural. We are acknowledging the diversity of India and the world. And we are talking about African literatures, Indian literatures, because we have various vernaculars in India. We have, within our English writing tradition, we have extremely different models. Arundhati Roy writing in a Malayalam, Mallu kind of anglicized version, and Amitav Ghosh from a Bangla kind of tradition is writing. So we have, within the Indian English writing today, we have multiple literatures. So the plurality of literatures, the plurality of cultures, the diversity of society must be acknowledged in a democratic pedagogy. And that's what we have done also. We have been doing in the higher academia, and we are teaching that diverse literature in a diverse society, in a democratic society. The canon and the literary canon, the pedagogy must reflect that diversity. There should be representation from all these contested social sections of the society. Likewise, in Kerala also, we need to do a lot of changes. We have been traditionally, we were teaching only the colonial canon, what was introduced by the British in 18th century or 19th century. That has been taught for a long time, almost a century now, more than a century now, because it's almost 200 years of teaching English in Kerala. We are boasting about that great legacy, because it was introduced in 1815 or 16 times, 1815, that is in early 19th century it was taught. So in 1918 Mulur himself, the disciple of Guru, one of the leading poets of Kerala, but he is also excluded from the canon now. So we have to include all these poets. That's why I'm mentioning them, him in particular. In 1918, Mulur wrote the Centenary of English in Malayalam language. He was a Malayalam poet. He was a learned man in Tamil, Sanskrit, and Malayalam, like his guru. But he was also learned in Pali, as well as he could read English language as well. So he had great reputation for English. And as a tool against the barbaric caste system and the old primitive caste Hindu hegemonic Varnashrama system of Kerala, he used English language, and he praised English language. He wrote an elegy, not an elegy, but a kind of ode to English, an ode to English, not an elegy, but an ode, a very cheerful kind of salutation to English in the English centenary. English Bhasha Shadabdi Purti. He has written a poem itself in praise of English, how modernity came through English, how the Guru has acknowledged English, and what is the futuristic potential of English he has written. So unfortunately, these things are not known to our students and even to our teachers and the academic community in general, because these people were very deliberately, the Guru's own statements, like what I mentioned in 1914 when he said, the British are our Gurus, or Mulur's poem on English language, celebrating the centenary in 1918. That means in 1818 itself, it was 1817 itself, it was the grammar school of CMS College, which was started by the CMS missionaries and LMS missionaries in Nagargovil, Sanandurapuram and Nagargovil. Everything is mentioned and saluted by Mulur in the English centenary poem. We don't know about it. It's not even in the syllabus, not even in the Malayalam syllabus. Then how can it come to the English syllabus, the English translation? So we need to translate a lot from Malayalam, especially these representative voices, those who stood for modernity and change and democracy in our land. And therefore, since they spoke about representation and democracy, they were sidelined by the elitist, exclusivist, hegemonic forces in our country, who are in our country and state, who are part of the decision-making and policy-making bodies today. So these poets, from Mulur to the historic speeches of the rational, defiant speeches of Narayana Guru regarding English language, the benefits of English. And unfortunately, they were called Ashan and his Guru were condemned as the bootlickers of the British. And like Ambedkar was humiliated as a stooge of the British by some of the right-wing writers here. Ashan and Narayana Guru were called the bootlickers of the British because they accepted the modernity aspects and the liberative dimensions of British imperialism and English language in particular. Ashan romanticized the whole discourse in Malayalam poetry by learning the British romantic tradition. Mulur, he revolutionized poetry. He created an anti-caste defiance in poetry through reading and knowing the English models. And he, as I told you, he has himself saluted the English literary pedagogy here, the ELT project itself in India. It was saluted, all the missionaries. He mentions Benjamin Bailey and Mead Saip and all those pioneers of LMS missionaries and CMS missionaries. He salutes them all in that poem. So Mulur is to be rehabilitated. Poigai Lapachan, a great voice. He's given partial space now in the university curriculum. Now we have 1 or 2 poems or songs of Poigai Lapachan. It's not sufficient. We have to bring all the poems of Poigai Lapachan into higher education, especially in the graduate and undergraduate post-supplementation and studies on Dalit poets and revolutionaries like Poigai Lapachan and the Praja Sabha speeches in the Legislative Assembly by Ayyankali. We need to bring it into our pedagogy. And we also need to rehabilitate the lost voices. Chodhi Chatan, Adi Pulaya Kavi Chodhi Chatan of Kochi, or Pallathiraman, who represented a voice, and of course the radical and rational voice of Sahodaran Ayyappan in Kerala. It is to be brought into the arena of textbook and curriculum in Kerala. At least in Kerala, these voices, Poigai Lapachan or Sahodaran Ayyappan or Pallathiraman or Chodhi Chatan, Pandit Karuppan himself, the Jadi Kumi of Pandit Karuppan, is to be rehabilitated into the canon, into both the Malayalam as well as we also need the English translation, especially in a time when democracy and modernity are in peril in India, when the real legal canon, the constitution, is in peril in India. We need to go for inclusion and representation and ensure true democracy in the academic world. Then it would be naturally reflected in the general society, because today's students and today's researchers, they are going to create the future for us. We believe in the posterity. We believe in the power of democracy. So therefore, we need to really go and democratize the canon, include the lost voices, the erased voices, the silenced voices must be included in the textbook and in the syllabus. And that's how we can make the education a more egalitarian and equitable and inclusive kind of a democratic paradigm. Anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm truly honored and delighted to be part of this intellectual international discourse. I once again express my sincere gratitude to Professor Murugan Babu and the college and Dr. Girish and all the Dr. Josna and all the chairman and the vice chairman, the executive committee, the students, researchers, and all the participants and listeners of this program. Thank you, and I am eager to listen to you and learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have the interactive session. Once again, a gentle reminder, please put forward your questions through chat box. So here we have the first question. On many instances, when minorities write about the realities of the society, they are shunned by the society. Even governments helps suppress them. For example, Taslima Nasri was issued with fatwa, was forced to flee the country and live in house arrest because of her book Lacha. Won't such reactions discourage writers from expressing their views?
Yes, of course. Taslima Nasreen is an example from Bangladesh. We have example, the sedition charge against Arundhati Roy, the previous example, and now the freedom of speech in the instance of Miss Sultana from Lakshadweep in the Lakshadweep crisis or controversy. We have the current example in Miss Sultana's dissent, and some charges and kind of inquiries against her. So this is, it happens, but it requires a lot of challenge and courage to fight against this kind of authoritarianism or totalitarian kind of tendencies from the state and the ruling kind of authorities. So we need to fight against it in a very peaceful and democratic way. So that is again the importance of democracy. It's nothing about aggressive kind of measures. It's not for any form of physical action or aggressive kind of antagonism or hostility or warlike kind of agitation, but we are for peaceful transformation through dialogue. That is the way of democracy, dialogue and democracy, protest and democracy. We can protest in a peaceful and cultural way. Writing, of course, literature and writing, poetry and prose, and painting and music and theater and cinema. All these are multimedia, various cyber kind of platforms are available. So fortunately, but it's also denied to various people in the Lakshadweep or the Northeast or Kashmir in particular, in the case of the present India. Of course, we need to be aware of these larger human rights and citizenship violations, and we need to fight against it in a peaceful, democratic and cultural way, cultural and political way. Of course, we need to fight against it. That's the only way out. Thank you for the question.
So we have another question. What is the relevance of Buddha's teachings in contemporary society?
Okay, thank you very much for that very contemporary question. As I told you, Buddha was the first to talk about inclusion and representation. Buddha was the first to include. He not only preached about it, but he also practiced the democracy that he preached. So he included women. He included the so-called untouchables. He included various Shudra and Atishudra or Avarna and female kind of persons into his Sangha. And that's why it's called a democratic kind of sect, the Sangha of the Buddha. Buddham, Sangham and Dhammam. These are the three important principles, the triple gems of the Buddha. And Sangha means a democratic order. Well, he had included with a lot of consultation with his disciples, whether to include Tagore himself writing about Chandaliga, Tagore's play, we know. And even before that, Tagore's Chandaliga was published in the 1930s. But in the early 1920s itself, Ashan published his Chandala Bhikshugi, where you have that great instance of Matangi coming to the Sangha and even conversing and debating with Prasenajit, the Maharaja of the kingdom of that time. So she talks about the caste system. She ridicules and rejects the caste system before the ruler of the country, the Raja, the king of the land. So that kind of enlightened nuns were created. And Manimekhala, I mentioned about Chatana's Manimekhala. The heroine of Manimekhala is Manimekhala Bhikuni, the Theri Manimekhala herself. And she, along with her mother, they have entered into the Sangha. And she was a sex worker in the beginning, the mother. And even sex workers, even the so-called barbers and all those Shudras and Atishudras were included into the Sangha. So this democratic principle of inclusion and representation is what making the Buddha contemporary and futuristic also. That's why even Ambedkar, who created this modern canon of ours, this Constitution of India, he acknowledged in his BBC interview in AR and also in the BBC interview towards the end of his life, he has explained it specifically that it is from the Buddha, my master, my guru, my master from the Buddha, that I am taking the modern democratic principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. It is not just from the French Revolution of late 18th century, but it is from the 2,500-year legacy of Buddhism, from the Buddha's teaching of Samatha and Karuna. That is the foundation of my democratic ethics, acknowledged Baba Sahib. So that's the contemporaneity. That's the present significance of the Buddha, that he preached democracy and he practiced democracy, and he provided a compassionate, an ethical and compassionate egalitarian legacy of life, an ethical way of living to the people, which is very much significant in the present, when a lot of violence, a lot of war and intimidation, a lot of violence and aggressions are going all around the country. Look at our own country or the Palestine issue. Everywhere it is, the war is imminent, violence is on the rise. So this is the situation. This is the context for the message, the lasting message of Karuna and Maitri and Prajna and Muditva and Samta of the Buddha. He is the greatest democrat of human history. In that sense, is the contemporary significance of the Buddha. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more question. So what are the factors led to the canon formation?
Okay, very fundamental question related to our topic. So canon is, as I told you, is a product of contemporary power. Canon is produced by of course, the people who are ruling, the ruling elites, those who are into positions and policy making. They are creating the canon. So that's why it becomes often exclusional. It excludes certain unwanted in courts for the elite. For the elite, certain things are unwanted. They will exclude that. And they will include only those things that are supportive to their own agendas. So that's why it's ideological or political. And it's often patriarchal, because patriarchy is ruling over the world. So patriarchal it is often, and it's also often it is masculinist, it is racist to a certain extent, that black people are often excluded from the canon. So in the previous European canon, till the say late 20th century, till Harold Bloom's Western canon came to publication, in the Western canon, you will find only the white male figures. Women were rarely found. For example, in the colonial canon that was introduced and taught in India for the last 200 years, you find Shakespeare, Milton, Chaucer, and Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Shelley, and all. You won't find an Afra Ben. You won't find Felicia Hemans. You won't find Dorothy Wordsworth. You won't find even Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley was recently rehabilitated by Alice Walker and others. Even Alice Walker was excluded, or Toni Morrison or bell hooks. You won't find them in the reading lists and syllabus. So women, Black women in particular, women of color, people of color, Asian and African writers. Within Asian and Africa, you won't find any Dalit writers or Adivasi writers. Only now we are having a few translations from Narayan in Kerala, or some Dalit voices, Poigila Pachan or to Narayan, they are translated and meagerly included. But otherwise, you find it as a product of caste. In Kerala and India, it's a product of caste Hindu kind of sensibility, and standards are prevailing in canon formation and in representation in the syllabi and all in various institutions in Kerala and India. So canon is often a product of power. It's a product of patriarchy. It's ideological. It is political. It's often exclusionary. Therefore, it is to be revised and democratized. That's the point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable insights into the topic, and we are very fortunate to have a session with you, sir. Dear participants, please fill up the feedback forms to get the participation certificate. Thank you. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. I invite Ms. Uttara for vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. Respected Speaker of the Day, Dr. Ajay Sekhar, sir. Respected Chairman, Nirmala Group of Institutions, Sir Sajeev Vattoli. Our dear Executive Director, Mrs. Dalit Literature. Our dear Principal, Professor Murugan Babu, sir. Vice Principal, Dr. Jojo Sankara. My respected teachers and dear college mates. We, the English Department of Nirmala College of Arts and Science, is honored today by the wonderful session we had from Dr. Ajay S. sir on the topic Democratizing the Canon, Inclusion and Representation in Pedagogy, which is a comparatively novel topic opened up to us English students as well as the whole college. We were taken into a new arena of learning. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ajay sir wholeheartedly on behalf of the entire college and the English department in particular for this great knowledge. Let me also thank our chairman, Sir Sajeev Vattoli, for providing us all support and care. I take this opportunity to thank Dali ma'am. Without her guidance and advice, Emerge 2021 would not have been a reality. Let me thank our dear principal, Professor Murugan Babu sir, for his timely guidances and advices. Let me also thank Vice Principal, Dr. Jojo Sankara, for the care and moral support. I look upon with awe the tremendous efforts our teachers take to make each day of Emerge 2021 a grand success. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. My dear college mates, without you, nothing is on the threshold of success, and I thank you all for the same. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the technical team. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uttara. Now we have come to the end of this webinar. Next, we have a session on Gamify, learning by Dr. Ajay S, Assistant Professor, Ma Dainis College, Parangi at 11:30 a.m. Once again, I thank all of you who joined with us to make this webinar a huge success. Thank you.